Why the super empath identity is an avoidant partner's greatest psychological threat. There's something most people don't understand about avoidant partners, and it's this. They are not afraid of love itself, they are afraid of losing control within it. They are comfortable in emotional distance because distance gives them power, safety, and predictability. But when a super empath enters their life, everything begins to shift in a way they can't easily manage. Because a super empath is not just someone who feels deeply, they are someone who sees deeply, understands patterns, and eventually refuses to play the emotional games that keep avoidants comfortable. At first, the avoidant is drawn to the super empath in a way that feels almost magnetic. The empath's warmth, patience, and emotional intelligence create a safe space the avoidant has never truly experienced. For a moment, they feel understood without being pressured, and that's rare for them. But what they don't realize is that this connection comes with a hidden risk, because the same empath who can understand them deeply is also capable of recognizing their defenses, their distancing patterns, and their emotional unavailability. As the relationship progresses, something subtle begins to happen. The super empath starts noticing inconsistencies. They see how affection comes and goes. They notice how vulnerability is often followed by withdrawal. They begin to understand that the connection is not balanced. And this is where the dynamic becomes threatening to the avoidant. Because most people either chase harder or walk away quickly. But the super empath does something different. They stay aware. They don't immediately react. They observe. They adapt. They begin setting quiet boundaries. And this is the moment when the avoidant starts to feel something unfamiliar, a loss of control. You see, avoidants are used to being the ones who dictate the emotional pace of the relationship. They pull away, and the other person follows. They create distance, and the other person tries to close it. But the super empath doesn't follow that script forever. At some point, they stop chasing. They stop over-explaining. They stop trying to fix what isn't being reciprocated. And when that happens, the avoidant feels it deeply. Because now, the emotional dynamic has shifted. The person who once provided endless understanding is no longer overextending themselves. The energy changes from pursuit to presence, from neediness to self-respect. And that's incredibly destabilizing for someone who relies on distance to feel safe. What makes the super empath such a psychological threat is not aggression, it's clarity. They don't need to control the avoidant. They don't need to win arguments. They simply see what is happening and choose not to participate in unhealthy patterns anymore. And this creates a mirror the avoidant cannot easily ignore. Suddenly, their usual strategies stop working. Pulling away no longer guarantees being chased. Silence no longer creates the same emotional reaction. The power dynamic they were unconsciously relying on begins to dissolve. And in its place, something much more uncomfortable emerges: accountability. For an avoidant, this can feel overwhelming, because instead of being able to escape into distance, they are now faced with a partner who understands them but refuses to enable them. And that's where the real internal conflict begins. Part of them feels drawn in, because the connection with a super empath is real, deep, and emotionally fulfilling in a way they rarely experience. But another part of them feels exposed, because their protective patterns are no longer invisible. They are seen. And being seen at that level can feel like a threat to their independence and emotional defenses. This is why avoidants often behave in confusing ways around a super empath. They may come closer, then suddenly pull away harder than before. They may open up deeply, then shut down without explanation. It's not random. It's a reaction to the internal tension between wanting connection and fearing the vulnerability that comes with it. But here's the turning point. A super empath does not lose themselves in this push and pull forever. There comes a moment where they fully recognize the pattern, not just emotionally, but consciously. And once they reach that level of awareness, their behavior changes permanently. They no longer take distance personally. They no longer try to decode every mixed signal. They stop investing in potential and start responding to reality. And this is the moment when the avoidant feels the greatest psychological impact. because now they are no longer interacting with someone who can be emotionally pulled back in at any time. They are facing someone who has boundaries, self-worth, and the strength to walk away if necessary. And ironically, this is often when the avoidant feels the strongest pull toward the empath. Not because the empath is chasing them, but because they're not. The absence of pressure creates curiosity. The presence of boundaries creates respect. And the emotional independence of the super empath challenges the avoidant in a way they can't ignore. But here's the truth most people don't talk about. This dynamic doesn't guarantee a successful relationship. Because while the super empath can inspire growth, they cannot force it. The avoidant still has to choose to confront their own patterns, their fear of intimacy, and their discomfort with vulnerability. And many avoidants, unfortunately, are not ready to do that. So the super empath faces a choice: to stay and hope for change, or to walk away with clarity. And what defines a true super empath is not how deeply they love, but how strongly they respect themselves. They understand that connection should not come at the cost of emotional stability. They recognize that being understanding does not mean being available for inconsistency. And most importantly, they realize that the right relationship will not require them to constantly prove their worth. In the end, the super empath is the avoidant's greatest psychological threat, not because they demand more, but because they tolerate less. They break the cycle. They shift the dynamic. And in doing so, they force a truth that the avoidant can no longer avoid: either grow or lose something real.